I was 11 the year we moved to the edges of a quiet town called Westridge. It wasn't too big, wasn't too small. The kind of place where people waved before they even knew your name. And sometimes they knew your dog's name before they learned yours. My little sister and I weren't city kids exactly, but where we came from there had been apartment buzzers, crowded stairwells, and sirens that sang all night. Westridge was different. The night smelled like damp earth and pine needles. Wind pressed tall grass flat, then let it spring back up again. And the silence was so thick, it made our old place feel like a dream. My parents picked a squat ranch-style house right outside town, tucked off a single road with only one way in and one way out. Cornfields stretched on both sides, stitched together by empty lots. It was the kind of neighborhood where you could ride your bike until the sun sank red behind the fields and never see another kid unless you arranged it. The new school was Brentwood Elementary. Locals just called it B-Wood, like it was too much trouble to say the whole thing. It sat between a dry riverbed and an aging neighborhood where every house had peeling shutters no one ever touched. Recess never had more than 40 kids running around, and even then most just shuffled in circles. Hand-me-down jeans, faded t-shirts from old Little League teams. That was the uniform. The kids weren't mean, but they weren't quick to talk either. A lot of them came from farming families or parents who pulled long shifts at the West Ridge meatpacking plant. By 5th grade, I'd managed to make one real friend, Alyssa Wade. She was tall and bony with strawberry blonde hair always slipping out of its braid. And she had this laugh that cracked through the air too loud for someone who spent most of the day looking at her shoes. At lunch, we'd sit together on the edge of the blacktop, splitting our sandwiches and whispering about the things nobody else seemed to notice. Like how the gym teacher always smelled of stale cigarettes, or how the lunch lady slipped scraps to the stray cats behind the dumpster. But none of that mattered once he showed up. It was a Wednesday, early April. Clouds hung low and heavy, but the air pressed warm against our necks. Too warm for the season. Mr. Beasley, our usual PE teacher, was out. Appendicitis, we heard. None of us cared much. Beasley barked like a drill sergeant and doubled our laps if he caught us slacking. The announcement that we had a substitute only earned a few shrugs. Subs came and went all the time. Still, there was something strange about this one. Nobody knew his name when we walked up the slope to the upper field, a half-grassy, half-gravel stretch of land behind the school where we ran laps and played kickball. Alyssa walked beside me, humming a tune I didn't recognize. And then I saw him. He stood just past the fence line, waiting. He wasn't like any gym teacher I'd ever seen. Too tall, easily 6'4", built sharp and narrow so that his long coat draped off his shoulders like it belonged to someone else. His hair was black and slicked back tight, and he wore thick, square glasses that caught the weak sunlight, flashing so you couldn't see his eyes. His clothes made no sense. Dark jeans, a heavy coat, and battered gym shoes that looked like they hadn't touched a gym floor in years. "What the heck is he wearing?" Alyssa whispered, ducking closer to me. I let out a short laugh, but my chest squeezed tight. He didn't say anything right away. He just watched us file down toward him, lips pressed thin, like he was silently counting every head. I couldn't name it then, but something in me recoiled. That deep, warning thrum in your stomach that comes before your brain has the words to explain. And when his head turned, and those hidden eyes behind the glass landed square on me, the feeling sharpened, like I'd stepped out into traffic and realized too late a car was bearing down. "Hey girls," he said finally. His voice was smooth, slow, too measured. A smile crept onto his face, but it never touched his eyes. "I'm Coach Brent. I'll be your gym teacher today." A few boys let out half-hearted cheers, glad Beasley wasn't around. Alyssa nudged me, but I couldn't look away from him. Coach Brent started us with laps, standard. I was grateful to move, to put space between us. Still, every time I glanced back, I saw him leaning against the fence, one hand buried in his coat pocket, thumb twitching like he was tapping something unseen. His gaze roamed the field, but lingered too long on the girls. It made my skin prickle. After laps, he split us into groups. Some kids passed around a sagging football. Others grabbed jump ropes and dodgeballs from the bin. And the whole time, I kept feeling his eyes on us. Alyssa and I drifted to the far end of the field where the grass pressed up against the tree line. We found a scuffed softball and began tossing it back and forth, letting the rhythm fill the silence. After a while, Alyssa muttered, "He keeps looking over here." I turned mid-throw and caught him staring. His face didn't shift when I met his gaze. No quick glance away, no hint of embarrassment. Just that same slow blink behind the thick glasses and a faint smile fixed in place. His hand still rested inside his coat pocket, unmoving. "I'm going to ask to go to the bathroom," Alyssa said, voice trembling slightly. She shuffled her feet, the ball slipping from her hand. "No, wait." My words came out too fast. "Let's just hang on until class ends." "I have to pee," she whispered, though the urgency in her voice felt less about her bladder and more about getting away. Her fingers locked around my wrist. "You're coming with me." The gravel crunched under our sneakers as she tugged me toward him. My stomach knotted tighter with every step. As we closed the distance, his face shifted into something bright, practiced, like we were old friends walking up to say hello. "Ladies," he said warmly, too warmly. "What can I help you with?" I need to go to the bathroom," Alyssa answered, her voice barely above a murmur. "Do you?" His head tilted, leaning closer. Behind those square lenses, something flickered, something that wasn't kindness, wasn't interest. It was possession, like we already belonged to him. He stepped forward. I stepped back without thinking, heat rushing to my face. "What's your name?" he asked me, tone casual, almost playful. I didn't answer. My pulse hammered in my ears so loud I could barely breathe. His smile stretched wider, too wide, and then he turned to Alyssa. With a smooth motion, he draped an arm across her shoulders. At first it seemed friendly, a teacher's pat of reassurance, but his hand started to slip downward. "Let go of her," I snapped. My throat was dry, my hands shaking, but the words forced their way out sharp. He froze. Alyssa shoved out from under his arm and yanked me with her. We sprinted back across the field, diving into the shade of the trees. She was trembling, her breath coming in shallow gasps. My stomach churned hard enough to make me sick. I didn't know what to say, so I just stayed beside her, pressing my nails into the dirt, trying not to cry, trying not to turn around. But when we finally did, we saw him again. He was standing too close to Maya Tran, the quiet girl who always lingered after school to read. She was bent over the fence, reaching for a ball, when he stepped up behind her, laying a hand on her shoulder. He leaned in, lips moving just inches from her ear. Maya screamed, "Get off of me!" Her voice tore across the entire field. Everything froze. Balls dropped, jump ropes stilled. Some kids laughed nervously, others stood stiff with confusion. Coach Brent just straightened slowly, adjusting his glasses with one hand, expression unreadable. Later, during dismissal, a sixth grader named Dakota, someone we barely knew, slipped over to us. Her eyes were flat, serious. "Did he touch you guys too?" Alyssa and I both nodded. She nodded back once, tight, and said, "Come on." She led us to a huddle of girls near the fence. As soon as we were together, the words spilled out, overlapping, messy. Some were crying, others stared hard at the ground, but we all said the same things. The way he looked at us, the way he brushed his hands where they didn't belong, the way he never pulled that hand out of his coat. Something was wrong. Mrs. Langley, our trusted homeroom teacher, had been nearby. She listened without cutting us off, her face carved into something heavy and unreadable. When we finished, she finally spoke. "I'll handle it. You girls were brave." That night I told my dad. At first he just blinked at me, silent. Then his face drained of color, going gray-green. He stood up so fast his coffee spilled, splattering across the table. "Did he touch you?" His voice shook. I shook my head. "Just Alyssa." He closed his eyes and exhaled hard, fists tight at his sides. Thank God. He stopped himself. That was the first time I understood the depth of a father's fear, how quickly calm could ignite into something dangerous. If I'd said yes, if I'd whispered the wrong answer, I have no doubt he would have driven back to the school with the .357 locked in the garage toolbox. Weeks later, my parents asked if I wanted to testify. They told me I didn't have to, that plenty of other girls had already agreed, that the charges were piling up. Inappropriate contact, endangerment, and worse. Turns out, he'd been accused in another state years before. Westridge Elementary had failed to run a proper background check. I told them no. I couldn't face him again. My nightmares already dragged me back there enough. But he was sentenced anyway. 30 years. No parole. They said he cried in court. I hope the floor drank those tears whole. I'm 29 now, still in Colorado. Sometimes I drive past Brentwood Elementary. The fields look smaller. The trees don't tower the way they used to. The chain-link fence still stands, though now cameras watch from every corner, and there's a new principal's name on the sign. But that day never left me. The truth is, monsters don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they stand out in the sunlight, smile wide, and tell you to run laps. I should have transferred sooner. That thought never stops gnawing at me, creeping into quiet moments when I least expect it. And I don't mean in some melodramatic, eye-rolling teenage way. I mean in the kind of way that makes your skin crawl. That cold sweat, stomach-churning realization that you came too close to something you might not have survived. People say hindsight is 20/20, but looking back, I was stumbling blind. It began that September, the start of my second year at Creston Hill College, tucked away on the edge of a sleepy town called Northbridge in upstate New York. I was majoring in psychology, living off campus in a cramped apartment with 2 other girls, and holding down point guard on the women's basketball team. Life wasn't perfect. I missed home constantly, and my student loans loomed over me like a blade suspended by a single thread. But I had balance. I had routine. Until he showed up. Mr. Gabriel Hart. Mid-30s, tall, lean, his appearance so carefully put together it felt rehearsed. The kind of man whose trimmed stubble and pressed shirts gave the illusion of effortlessness. He carried himself with an easy arrogance, a faint smirk that made people lean in, as if he knew something they didn't. Even his cologne left a trail, sharp, expensive, clinging to the air long after he passed. And his voice, smooth enough to slide right past your defenses before you even realized you'd let it in. He joined our department as a part-time lecturer for human behavioral theory. Within a week, he was the name on everyone's lips. He's so different from the other professors. So modern. Not boring at all. He wasn't like faculty. He was more like some celebrity who happened to wander into the classroom. I didn't think much of it. Not at first. Not until I noticed the way he looked at me. Not the vague, unfocused glance you get when someone happens to be staring in your direction. No. This was deliberate. Calculated. His gaze carried weight. It landed just a second too soon, lingered a second too long. Like he was cataloging me, frame by frame. A specimen under glass. At first it was just during lectures when I'd answer a question. His eyes would fix, unblinking, a little too intent. Then came the smiles, the sly half-smirks. And then, comments. "You really hold your posture well, Madison. That's a sign of someone who knows her body." He said it casually, almost like it was part of the lesson, but the air shifted. My stomach twisted. I forced a laugh, tried to brush it off. Professors say weird things sometimes, right? But the words clung to me like oil. It wasn't professional. It wasn't admiration. It was hunger. The weeks blurred. Our team was climbing fast, pushing hard toward the regional semifinals. Coach had us running drills until we could barely stand, and between practices, classes, and cramming late at night, I could hardly keep my head above water. But somehow, Mr. Hart was always there, outside the lecture hall, by the campus gym, even though he had no reason to be there. Once, late at night, I glanced out my apartment window and saw him, standing across the street, in the rain, not moving, just watching. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, he was gone. Stress, I told myself. You're tired. He's weird, sure, but not dangerous. He hasn't touched you, he hasn't done anything. Right? Then came the night of the regional semifinals. We played like our lives depended on it, clawing for every point. The gym thundered with noise, and with 9 seconds left, the ball landed in my hands. I stepped back, heart slamming against my ribs, and launched the shot. The three-pointer dropped clean. The buzzer screamed, the crowd exploded. My teammates swarmed me, wrapping me in sweat-slick arms, voices hoarse from screaming. Cameras flashed. We were going to nationals. The locker room afterward was chaos, joy, exhaustion, tears mixing with laughter. Girls screamed into towels, collapsed onto benches, sprayed water into the air like champagne. It was beautiful madness, and I couldn't breathe. I slipped away, unnoticed, ducking into the private shower stalls at the back, the ones usually reserved for staff. I just needed quiet. A pause. Hot water poured over me, steam clouding the tiny space. I pressed my forehead against the cool tile, letting the roar in my chest settle, the adrenaline finally easing. For a few minutes, the world shrank to nothing but water and breath. But underneath the calm, something hummed. A low, restless buzzing in my chest, a warning. And then, I heard it. The door. Just the faintest creak. Almost drowned by the rush of water. Almost. But not enough. But I knew I'd locked it. I remember checking twice, hand on the knob, hearing the click, certain. My stomach nodded. Hello? My voice cut weakly through the steam, half swallowed by it. No answer. I twisted the shower handle off, and the silence that followed was suffocating. My breathing sounded too loud, ragged against the echo of tile. I pulled the towel tight around me, water still streaking down my legs, and stepped out into the foggy locker room. The lights flickered, once, twice, before holding steady. Who's there? I tried to sound sharp, annoyed, like I had control. But my voice cracked in the middle, betraying me. Something shifted in the mirror. A shadow. Wrong. Out of place. And then he stepped into view. Mr. Hart. He wore dark slacks and a gray button-up, the fabric damp at the shoulders from the rain. His hair clung to his forehead, beads of water tracing down his temple. His lips curved, but not into a smile. More like something rehearsed, stretched, unnatural. You were incredible tonight, he said, calm as if we were standing in a hallway after class. My throat closed. How did you get in here? My voice came out low, shaking. The janitor, he said smoothly, leaning against the doorframe like it was casual, like we were old friends. You forgot something. He let me in. His eyes lingered on me, the towel, my skin. You should be more careful about who has keys. Get out, I snapped, but it came out thin, brittle. That's not what your eyes are saying, he whispered. He pushed off the frame and stepped closer, each movement deliberate, measured. I've seen you. Do you know how long I've watched you play? The way your body moves? I backed up fast, water dripping from my hair down my spine. Don't come any closer. But he did. His steps were slow, almost silent, like he had practiced this exact moment. My hand flew instinctively to my locker. Empty. My phone wasn't there. My pulse stuttered, and then his hand moved. Slow, intentional. A knife appeared, catching the fluorescent light. I don't want to hurt you. His voice rasped, cracked, almost hoarse. But I will if you scream. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was iron, fingers digging in. I yanked back, but he was stronger. Much stronger. The towel slipped, and with his other hand, he jerked it toward him. I screamed. He slammed me against the cold tile wall, the impact jolting through my spine. His breath was hot against my face. "You wanted this," he growled, pressing the flat of the blade against my throat. "Don't lie." Tears blurred my vision. My body seized, paralyzed by the instinct to freeze, to survive. His hand shook, just enough for me to feel it. His breath hitched, uneven. The knife smelled metallic, sharp, close enough to taste in the air. Then, something shifted. His foot slid. He had stepped on a bar of soap I'd dropped earlier. His balance went, his body pitching sideways. He crashed hard, his skull slamming against the edge of the shower bench. The sound was sickening. The knife clattered, skidding across the wet floor. I didn't think. I kicked him in the ribs as hard as I could, heard the grunt rip from him, grabbed the knife, and bolted. I didn't care that I was barefoot, drenched, half-naked. I didn't care about the towel slipping with every step. I burst through the locker room doors, screaming so loud it echoed across the empty gym, bouncing back at me like a warning siren. Campus security came running. The rest blurred. They found him in his car, parked just around the corner. In the trunk, plastic zip ties, rope, a pair of handcuffs. A duffel bag with my name taped neatly on the side. The knife I'd snatched from him was traced to a hunting shop 3 towns over. He had planned all of it, not just watching, planning. The police searched his office, a hidden drive crammed with photos of me. Hundreds. Pictures outside my apartment, taken through a long lens. Drafted emails never sent. One folder labeled simply, "Ours." The college tried to recover. Meetings, counseling sessions, long careful emails about student safety. None of it mattered. None of it erased the night. None of it changed how close I had come. I withdrew before the semester ended, went home. I haven't touched a basketball since. And still, years later, I wake up in the dark, heart racing, throat raw, from dreams where the shower is running but no one is there. Dreams where his breath warms the back of my neck, where his whisper slithers into my ear again. "You wanted this." I didn't. I never did. I never will. Now I listen to my gut. I never ignore silence when it changes. I was never the kind of kid to speak up. Not in class, not in assemblies, and definitely not when it came to defending anyone else. I preferred to keep my head low, hand in my homework on time, and just move quietly through the day, hoping no one noticed me. That's how I got by being invisible. For the most part, it worked. But in 7th grade, at East Ridge Middle School in Northern Ontario, something happened that made invisibility impossible. It should have been just another year, the kind that fades into the blur of locker bells and cafeteria noise. But that was the year the school decided to stick me in a split class, 7s and 8s mixed together. I was only 12, one of the smaller kids, and it felt strange sitting next to 13-year-olds who seemed like they belonged in high school already. Some of the grade 8s looked like they could have passed for adults, and next to them, I felt younger than ever. That's when Sophie Marlowe entered the picture. She was in 8th grade, tall for her age, taller than most of the boys in class, with this long auburn hair that always looked brushed and shining, and pale eyes that seemed to hold more confidence than any of us could understand. She wasn't loud, not the kind of girl who flirted or tried to draw attention to herself. Sophie had this maturity about her, the kind that should have let her blend in quietly. Instead, it made her stand out, especially to the wrong kind of people. One of those people was Mr. Delaroso, our gym teacher. Everyone called him Coach D, though none of us said it with affection. He was in his 40s, broad-shouldered, with a heavy black beard that made him look older than he probably was. He always wore the same navy tracksuit, the whistle bouncing against his chest as he moved. From day one, something about him put me on edge. He didn't have the same energy the other PE teachers did. No pep talks, no encouragement, not even the usual fake enthusiasm. Instead, he was watchful, like he wasn't paying attention to the class as a whole, but to individual people. About 3 weeks into the term, things started getting weird. During warm-ups, he always asked for a student to demonstrate. It was supposed to rotate, but somehow it didn't. Again and again, it was Sophie. Sophie, why don't you show everyone a proper wall sit? Sophie, you've got strong form. Demonstrate the lunge for us. She'd pause, glance around, and then step forward, her face tight with unease, but never outright refusing. He'd stand behind her, close, too close. He'd kneel at her side, pressing his hand lightly against her back or adjusting her ankle with his fingertips. It's important to align the body correctly, he'd say, as if that excused it. None of us ever got that treatment. If he picked a boy, it was me or Callum. And with us, it was always quick. Just a nod, a short, "That's fine." No touching. The difference was impossible not to notice, even at 12. We didn't have the vocabulary for it back then, but every time Sophie was called up, the air in the gym changed. You could feel it, like static crawling under your skin. By late October, things escalated. One afternoon, we were in the boys' change room halfway out of our uniforms, goofing off and throwing socks across the benches, when the door banged open. Coach D marched in without knocking, his jaw tight. "Which one of you took the stopwatch off my desk?" His voice cracked like a whip. We froze. No one said a word. "Don't play dumb," he snapped. "I had it there this morning. Someone thought it was funny to take it." His eyes scanned the room, landing on each of us for a second too long. I remember looking at Callum, who gave me the smallest shake of his head. "Don't say anything." "I'll find out who it was," Coach D went on, "and if any of you are covering, you'll all be in trouble." Then he stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Silence. Just the sound of socks settling on the floor. Then Callum muttered under his breath, "Freaking perv." A couple of kids snorted. Someone else repeated it louder. "Coach D's a perv." And just like that, the whole room exploded in a chant. Voices overlapping, boys grinning and shouting as if they'd been waiting for an excuse. "Coach D's a perv! Coach D's a perv! Coach D's a perv!" Even I was shouting it, my voice blending with everyone else's in the cramped change room. We were just dumb kids, too young to fully grasp what was happening, but old enough to sense that something was wrong. Chanting was the only weapon we had, the only way we knew how to push back against something that felt bigger than us. The wall between the change room and the gym was thin, so thin you could hear sneakers squeak and whistles blow through it, which meant Coach D heard us. 5 seconds later, the door slammed open and he stormed back in, his face red with fury. "Shut your mouths right now." His voice cracked like it could split the walls. "Any more of that and every single one of you is going to the principal. Do you understand me?" Silence fell instantly. We froze, socks in hand, shirts half on, no one daring to breathe. He stood there glaring, his eyes moving slowly from face to face like he was memorizing us. He let it hang for 10 long seconds, then turned and walked out again, the door rattling in its frame. But something had shifted. For the first time, he didn't feel untouchable. 2 days later, I was playing indoor soccer when he called me over with a sharp whistle and a jerk of his chin. "Go tell Sophie I need to see her in my office," he said, pointing across the gym. I hesitated. "She's right there. You can just..." His eyes cut into me. "Did I ask you to talk back?" I swallowed hard. "No, sir." I jogged over to Sophie, who was tying her shoelaces by the bleachers. I kept my voice low, almost embarrassed to say it. "Coach wants to see you, in his office." Her brow furrowed. "Did he say why?" I shook my head. "No." She nodded slowly, her face tight, uncomfortable, like she wanted to argue but didn't know how. I watched her straighten up, brush off her skirt, and start walking across the gym floor toward that office door. My stomach knotted as she disappeared inside. Something about it felt wrong, so wrong that I couldn't stop staring at the closed door even as the game picked up again. Later that day, I heard what happened. Not from Sophie. She didn't say a word. but from Maya, her closest friend. We were sitting behind the school at lunch, the chain-link fence at our backs, when she told me in a whisper that shook with anger. "He told Sophie she's been improving in squats," Maya said, glaring down at her sandwich like she wanted to crush it. "Then he made her do some in his office. Alone. Door shut." My chest tightened. "What?" Maya's voice cracked. "He stood behind her, grabbed her waist, said he was checking alignment. Then he leaned over, stared down her shirt, and asked her if he was making her uncomfortable." The bile rose in my throat. "You're kidding." "She left crying," Maya whispered. "Didn't even wait for class to end." That afternoon, the boys' change room erupted again, but this time it wasn't playful chants. It was rage. "You're a pervert!" Callum shouted, slamming his locker shut so hard the metal bent. "Touching girls in his office? That sick bastard." The anger spread like fire. Voices overlapped, fists pounded against lockers. We didn't care if he hurt us this time. In fact, part of us wanted him to. We wanted him to come in so we could spit the words in his face. But nothing happened, not officially. Coach D kept his job. No announcement, no investigation, at least not one we ever heard about. Life at East Ridge carried on like nothing had happened. The only change was subtle. He stopped calling on Sophie, stopped looking at her, stopped acknowledging she even existed. Sophie spent the rest of that year glued to her friends, always surrounded, never alone. In 8th grade, she got a different PE teacher, Ms. Holden, who everyone liked. Firm but fair, the kind who made kids want to try. But the school never said anything. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. I wanted to ask Sophie if she was okay, but I never found the right words. Then she was gone. She didn't show up at our high school the next year. Word was she'd moved to her aunt's place in British Columbia. Now I'm 25. I still live in this town. I work part-time and sometimes walk past East Ridge on my way to the bus stop. The building looks smaller than I remember. The fence around the gym is rusted through at the bottom, and the mural we painted in grade 6 is chipped and peeling. And I still think about Sophie. I remember her face that day she walked toward his office, scared, hesitant, but obedient, because none of us ever questioned adults. I remember how it felt to say nothing, to do nothing, even when my stomach screamed that something was wrong. I don't know where she is now. I hope she's safe. I hope she found people who protect her better than I did. And I hope Coach D never hurt anyone else. But the thought that haunts me most is what could have happened if she hadn't bolted, if she hadn't trusted her fear enough to leave that office before it went any further. Would I have heard her crying through the wall? Would anyone have believed her? Or worse, would the school have done nothing anyway? People say kids don't understand serious situations, but we did. We knew exactly what he was. We just didn't know what to do about it. And now, years later, I live with that silence. Every single day. That silence. I used to roll my eyes whenever adults talked about a gut feeling. To me, it sounded like some cliché line people pulled out when they didn't have a real explanation. But now, looking back, I wish I had trusted mine the very first time I met Mr. Ellison. I was 14 when I transferred to Edison High, a worn-down little public school tucked into the quieter side of Lyndale, Ohio. My parents had split the year before, and after my grandfather passed, Mom moved us into her childhood home. Everything felt unsettled. New house, new routines, no friends, no anchor. Being the new kid halfway through freshman year made me shrink in on myself even more. Mr. Ellison was one of the first teachers who actually spoke to me. He wasn't even technically my teacher. He worked as an inclusion facilitator, which basically meant he floated around helping kids who needed extra support. He was middle-aged, tall but a little wiry, with salt and pepper hair combed back in that dated, almost 80s kind of way. Khakis and brown loafers every single day like a uniform. But it wasn't the clothes that stuck with me. It was his eyes. They lingered. Not in a way you could call out, but just a fraction too long. long enough to make you feel like you were under a microscope. The first time we spoke, I had dropped a book outside my English class. He bent down, scooped it up, and held it out. "You new here?" he asked, smiling. But his eyes didn't smile with him. "Yeah," I muttered, shifting the book into my arms. "Just moved last week." "Well, we're lucky to have you. I'm Mr. Ellison. If you ever need anything at all, you just come find me, all right?" I nodded automatically, polite the way Mom raised me to be, though my stomach was twisting. Something about his tone made me want to leave right then. A week later, I made the mistake of saying something nice to him. He'd cut his hair, and when we locked eyes near my locker, the words just slipped out. "Nice haircut." I didn't mean it. It was reflex. "Oh, wow." His smile lit up in a way that felt too much. "You noticed? That's very sweet of you, Lila." I froze. I didn't remember telling him my name. After that, I started seeing him everywhere, standing a little too close to my locker, waving across the parking lot, accidentally bumping into me near the vending machines. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Edison was small. Maybe I was just paranoid. But then October came, and I broke my toe at a haunted house downtown. Some kid in a werewolf mask jumped out, scared me so bad I tripped. Not serious, just a fracture, a walking boot for a couple weeks. I hadn't told anyone at school. No social media posts. The only people who knew were Mom and the nurse at urgent care. The next day, during passing period, Mr. Ellison stopped me near the science wing. "Haunted houses can be dangerous, huh?" he said with this soft little laugh. "Next time, maybe stick to carving pumpkins." I froze in the middle of the hallway. My mouth went dry. How did he know? Before I could ask, he just shoved his hands in his pockets and walked away like nothing had happened. By sophomore year, it wasn't coincidence anymore. It was routine. He'd show up at my lunch table before my friends arrived, always with some excuse. "Oh, I'm just checking on a student. Teacher's lounge is too loud today." Then he'd sit across from me, asking about my classes, my weekend, what music I liked. I kept my answers short, clipped. But I was raised to respect adults, especially teachers. Telling him to leave felt impossible. It wasn't until Natalie, my closest friend, saw him sitting with me that someone else noticed. "Lila," she whispered after he walked off. "Why does he always sit here? Doesn't he, have a job?" I shrugged, embarrassed. "I don't know, he just shows up sometimes." "He gives me the creeps," she said flatly. "You should tell someone." "But tell them what? That he was too friendly? That he knew things he shouldn't?" None of it was clear enough, not yet. That changed later that year. It was a Thursday. I was at my locker when I noticed him hurrying up the stairwell across the hall. He tripped hard and fell flat on his face. A few kids nearby laughed. He wasn't hurt, just a scraped elbow. But when he looked up and realized I'd seen it, his entire expression shifted. His cheeks went bright red, eyes glassy like he was about to cry. I didn't think much of it until lunch, when he slid onto the bench across from me with a tray of food. "I just wanted to apologize," he said quietly. "About earlier. I never meant to embarrass myself like that in front of you." His voice shook, and then he added, "It's not every day someone you care about sees you fall like that." My stomach knotted so tight I thought I'd be sick. I couldn't even answer. I just stared down at my sandwich, praying he'd get up and walk away. Natalie was late to lunch that day, and the whole time I kept silently begging her to show up. Mr. Ellison sat across from me, talking endlessly about his youth, the injuries he'd had, all his regrets, like we were old friends catching up. The second Natalie finally appeared and dropped her tray beside me, he stood up without finishing his sentence and slipped away. No goodbye. Nothing. By junior year, I started rearranging my days just to avoid him. I'd take different hallways, duck into bathrooms, anything to steer clear. But on the very first day back, as I was heading toward the cafeteria, I heard my name called down the corridor. Lila. I turned, and there he was, walking toward me with open arms. Before I could react, he pulled me into a hug, tight, full-bodied, the kind of hug you give someone you're in love with. His breath was hot against my ear. I missed you so much over the summer. School just isn't the same without you. I let out a thin, awkward laugh and tried to pull away. It's good to be back, I said, my voice wobbling. That year, he stopped waiting for my friends to leave. He'd sit with me no matter who was there. Once Natalie tried to slide between us, but he rested his hand lightly on her shoulder. Don't you want to sit across from Lila so you can see her better? Natalie shot me a look, sharp, questioning before moving down the bench. It only escalated from there. His comments became personal, cutting. Your friends don't appreciate you. They don't see the real you. You deserve someone who listens. And he always listened. Always watching. One day at lunch, just making conversation, I mentioned I had a dentist appointment after school. Harmless, forgettable. After lunch, I walked out to the parking lot, climbed into my old Toyota and turned the key. Nothing. Dead. I muttered curses under my breath, trying again and again. Then came the knock. I jumped. Mr. Ellison was standing outside my window, peering in. You all right? He asked. I rolled the window halfway down. Yeah, it won't start. My stepdad's on his way. I lied, heart hammering. I can drive you, he offered, smiling. It's not like your house is far. Only a couple blocks down Maple, right? My stomach dropped, ice in my veins. I had never told him where I lived. Before I could respond, my stepdad's truck screeched into the lot. Relief nearly made me dizzy. Mr. Ellison straightened, smiling, and walked toward him like it was the most natural thing in the world. It's a pleasure to finally meet the man who raised such a beautiful young lady, he said, extending his hand. I'll never forget the way my stepdad's jaw tightened as he shook it. That night I told him everything. I told Mom too. Their horror was plain. We reported it to the principal, who promised it would be handled, but nothing happened. The very next day, Mr. Ellison was still there, still watching. 3 weeks later, I transferred schools. Senior year, I kept my head down. New town, new routines, a part-time job delivering groceries through an app called Drop Off. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me independence and let me avoid people. 2 weeks in, I got a delivery with a note attached. Back door, you can just walk in. Not unusual. A lot of older customers left notes like that. The house was a small one-story on the edge of town. Quiet, ordinary. I parked, grabbed the bags, and walked around back. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly. Hello? I called, stepping into the kitchen. No answer. Then I nearly dropped the bags. Mr. Ellison was standing there. Same khakis, same loafers, that greasy, combed-back hair. But his eyes, wild, glassy, too bright. Lila, he said, stepping forward. You came. My throat closed. I've missed you so much, he continued, his voice trembling with something like joy. It's been torture not hearing from you on our anniversary. My chest tightened. What? What are you talking about? Our anniversary, he whispered, softer now. 2 years today. Don't you remember? Then, before I could move, he leaned in and kissed my cheek, lingering far too long. My body jolted with panic. I shoved him away. I have to go, I said, voice cracking. No, don't leave. His face contorted, pleading, desperate. I made lunch. I thought we could celebrate. I even cleaned the whole house for you. Quit your job. Just spend the day with me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. My boss, furious, wondering why I was late. An idea sparked. If I don't quit in person, they'll make me return the delivery money. I lied. My voice shook, but I forced a smile. Let me go now, and I'll come right back. His eyes searched mine. You promise? I promise, I whispered. The second I slid into my car, I peeled out of the driveway and drove straight to the police station. My parents met me there. I told the officers everything, every word, every detail. This time, they listened. This time, it was serious. Mr. Ellison was questioned, placed under investigation. I never saw him again. But sometimes, even now, I get that same gut feeling that he's still out there, watching, waiting. I was always the quiet one in class. Even back in elementary school, I wasn't the kind of kid teachers remembered once the year ended. I turned in my homework, never caused trouble, kept to myself. It wasn't that I didn't want friends. I just never knew how to fit into conversations without feeling like an intruder. Some kids seemed born to draw people in, funny, loud, magnetic. I wasn't any of that. By 6th grade, my family had just moved to a small town in Pennsylvania. My mom picked up every double shift she could at the hospital, and my dad, well, he wasn't in the picture anymore. We rented this little house at the edge of town, quiet street, peeling paint, chain link fence. From there, I could walk to East Linton Middle School, a squat brick building that always smelled faintly of bleach, cafeteria food, and mildew creeping up the faded linoleum floors. Inside, the green lockers were dented and scraped with initials carved by kids long gone. Most of the friend groups were already tight, and I was just the new, awkward girl hauling around a cello nearly as tall as me. My name's Elena. I'm 20 now, in college. But back then, all I wanted was to disappear into the background. That's when Mr. Stanton arrived. He replaced our orchestra teacher, Miss Vickers, who'd suddenly vanished midway through the year. Nobody knew why, though the older kids whispered she'd fought with the principal and walked out. I remember hoping the new guy would have her same soft smile, that gentle way she had of making mistakes feel less humiliating. But Mr. Stanton wasn't like that. The first time I saw him, I thought he looked like someone who had forgotten how to laugh. His face was carved deep with frown lines, and his gray hair was slicked back with an almost wet shine. He wore stiff dress shirts buttoned all the way to the top, as if comfort was a crime, and his voice rasped like he'd been yelling even when he hadn't. He was tall, towering really, at least 6'4", and to an 11-year-old, he might as well have been a monument. Something in me recoiled before he even spoke. He planted himself at the front of the classroom, eyes sweeping over us like he was deciding who was worth keeping. "We will not be wasting time," he said finally, his tone clipped and hard. "I run a serious program. If you're not here to learn, you can leave." No smile, no introductions, no cheesy, fun fact. Just drills, straight-backed posture exercises, bow holds, scales until our fingers ached. By the end of the first week, we all knew he wasn't just strict, he was cold. And I noticed something else. He didn't care much for the boys, rarely corrected them, barely looked their way. But with the girls, it was different. His hand would rest too long on a shoulder as he adjusted bow position. He'd lean close, his face just inches away when he spoke, even when he didn't need to. I told myself maybe that's how adults acted, that I was just imagining the knot in my stomach. Then came the day he made me dance with him. It was about 2 months in. We were working on a waltz, but the rhythm kept falling apart. Stanton snapped his baton down on the stand with a sharp crack, and the music stuttered to silence. He let out a long, theatrical sigh. "None of you understand the beat," he said, scanning the rows of us. His eyes narrowed. "I need a volunteer." The room froze. Nobody moved. I buried my face in the sheet music, pretending to be lost in the notes. But then, I made the mistake of looking up. Just for a second, long enough to meet his eyes. And then he smiled. "Elena," he said, his voice smooth this time. "Come up here." My heart seemed to drop into my shoes. For a moment, I stayed stuck in place, cello still balanced against my shoulder like a shield. Then I forced myself to stand. "Leave the instrument," he added, waving his hand. "Just you." A ripple of whispers slid through the room. A couple of kids snickered under their breath. My ears burned. Was I about to be humiliated in front of everyone? Did he want me to prove something? I walked to the front, each step stiff and slow, my palms sweating. Stanton shifted to the side, giving me space, and gestured for me to stand directly in front of him. "Closer," he said. I shuffled forward an inch, staring hard at the buttons of his shirt. I couldn't look up. "Closer." Another step. His breath brushed the top of my forehead. Then, without asking, he lifted my right arm into the air, pressed his hand into mine, and pulled my other arm against his side. I went rigid. 1, 2, 3. His voice was steady, deliberate as he swayed our arms side to side. "This is the rhythm. This is what you're all missing." Behind me, the classroom went silent. I didn't dare glance back, but I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes. My skin burned. I wanted to melt into the floor, disappear. I tried once to slip free, easing my hand away. His fingers snapped around my wrist, tugging me back to him. "Not yet," he murmured low and tight, the words threaded with irritation. His grip wasn't crushing, not enough to leave a mark, but it was firm, possessive, like I was something that belonged to him, something he wasn't ready to release. When he finally let me go, I walked back to my chair in a fog. My chest hammered against my ribs, my bow shaking when I lifted it again. The rest of the class blurred by in fragments of sound and movement. Nobody said a word, at least, not out loud. But after the bell rang, as we packed up, Maya, a girl I'd barely spoken to before, leaned close and whispered, "He made Zoe do it yesterday. Same thing." Her eyes flicked toward the door. "It's not about the beat." I didn't reply. I couldn't. After that, it only got worse. He started finding me in the hallways between classes. I'd be walking toward math or history when a hand landed on my shoulder, and there he was, smiling like we shared some private joke. "Elena," he'd say, too casually, "practicing your shifts?" Or, "You're really improving, you know that?" I'd nod, mutter thanks, keep my voice polite. Always polite. I never knew what else to say. And then his hands would rest, both of them, on my shoulders, thumbs pressing lightly just beneath the collarbone. Sometimes I'd already be standing near a locker or against a wall, and his frame would fill the space in front of me, blocking any easy way out. No teachers ever walked by. I never saw him do it to the boys. Not once. He made it seem ordinary, harmless, like if I complained I'd look hysterical. Like I was imagining the unease that kept building in my chest. So I started changing my routes. Took the long way around to class. My few friends began to notice and helped where they could. "He's by the vending machines," Maya would warn, lowering her voice. "Take the back stairs." And I did. Every time. Eventually, I told my mom. I didn't know how to put it into words. My throat locked when I tried to explain. I finally managed. "He makes me uncomfortable. He touches people too much." Her face tightened with worry. "Do you want me to talk to the school?" Panic shot through me. "No, please don't. I don't want to make it worse." She hesitated, then nodded. She didn't push. Maybe she should have. Maybe I should have let her. Toward the end of the year, we had a big concert. Parents, teachers, students, everyone would be there. I told myself it would be safer with so many eyes watching. Before the show, Stanton walked down the backstage rows, crouching beside chairs, checking tuning. When he reached me, he knelt close, face almost level with mine. "You look nice tonight," he said softly. "Very elegant." My stomach twisted hard. I didn't answer. Didn't even look at him. His hand reached out, brushed something invisible from my sleeve, and then he straightened, moving on. That night I played with a kind of fury. Every ounce of discomfort, anger, shame. I pushed it into the music, every note sharp and clean. I didn't glance at him once. The next school year, he was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. Like Miss Vickers before him, He disappeared overnight. At first we had a substitute, and later Mrs. Landers came. Warm, kind, gentle. The kind of teacher who always asked permission before adjusting a bow or posture. No one ever said what happened to Stanton. Some kids joked he was fired for being creepy. Others whispered he retired. I never learned the truth. But I still think about him sometimes, and I wonder how many other girls carry stories like mine. Silent, uneasy memories buried in classrooms, dismissed because we were quiet, because we were scared, because we were told to respect our teachers no matter what. But we shouldn't have been. I was 14 when I first learned what it felt like to carry a kind of fear that doesn't scream in your face, but whispers at the back of your mind. The kind that doesn't chase you down dark alleys but walks a step behind, smiling like it knows where you'll turn next. It crept in during the first week of my third year of secondary school, in a small town just outside Sheffield. I won't say exactly where. At that age, I blended in so well I may as well have been furniture. My dad used to say I could fade into the wallpaper and no one would notice. He wasn't wrong. I wasn't brave, wasn't loud, didn't stir trouble. I existed quietly. That was all. But that autumn was already heavy. My uncle had just died after 2 long years of cancer, and the funeral was held the very day classes began. The morning after, Mom pressed me to go in. "Routine will help," she said as she tightened her ponytail in the bathroom mirror. "It's what your uncle would have wanted." I stared at my own reflection once she left. The uniform felt like it belonged to somebody else, too stiff, hanging awkwardly from my thin shoulders. My face looked pale, hollow-eyed. I wasn't ready to smile at anyone or listen to jokes. I just wanted the year to slide by without leaving marks. My first class was English. That's where I met him. Mr. Linton. He couldn't have been more than his mid-20s. Dark hair combed neatly, a short beard, wire-rimmed glasses that softened his face and made him look, well, approachable. He looked like the kind of man you'd expect to find, sitting in a cafe with a notebook and a copy of Hamlet on Sunday mornings, not someone you'd instinctively keep your guard up around. When he looked at me that first time, it wasn't frightening. Just a glance that lingered one beat too long. I brushed it off. People look. It happens. I'd chosen a desk near the back by the window, my usual tactic for disappearing, but somehow his eyes landed on me anyway. During roll call, he tilted his head at my name. "Miss Sear, is it?" His voice was light, teasing in that teacherly way. I nodded, barely lifting my gaze. "You've got that writer's look about you," he added, smiling toward the rest of the class. "Watch out, everyone. We've got a future novelist in here." Some kids laughed. I didn't. I just stared down at the doodle I'd been scratching into my notebook. He was just trying to be engaging, I told myself. Just warming up a new room of bored teenagers. Nothing strange about that. But it didn't stop. The first weeks blurred into a haze, grief sitting heavy on top of schoolwork. Days ran into each other like fog. But underneath it, I started noticing Mr. Linton more. Or maybe it was that he noticed me more. He lingered near my desk when others only got a passing glance. He'd crouch down asking me about my stories. But his questions weren't about grammar or structure. They were oddly personal, circling the subject instead of teaching. When I turned in a short story about losing someone, he praised it too hard, too intimately. "You have a beautiful way of seeing pain," he told me once, his voice lower than it needed to be. "That's rare." My chest went tight. I didn't know how to respond. I forced a small, polite smile and turned away. Another day, as I bent over my book, he leaned closer than was necessary. His breath brushed my hair as he whispered, "You remind me of someone I used to know. She was quiet too, just like you." The words crawled under my skin. From then on, the nicknames started. My star pupil. Angel. Once even bright eyes. Always quiet, said low, as though they were secrets meant only for me. My friends noticed, but not the way I did. "You're his favorite," one of them teased after he asked me to stay behind to go over my metaphors. She giggled. I just shrugged. How could I explain that my stomach clenched every time I pushed open the classroom door? That my chest tightened when I felt his gaze trace across the room and settle on me? He hadn't touched me. He hadn't said anything you could point to as wrong. But I found myself keeping count anyway, of how many times he stared too long, how many seconds he stood too close, how often I caught him watching me not only in class but from the doorway when I passed him in the hall. One morning I was late, rushing down the corridor with my bag half zipped and my heart pounding. When I reached the classroom, the door was locked. I knocked, cheeks burning. A moment later, it swung open, and there was Mr. Linton, smiling in a way that made my stomach knot. "I was hoping you'd still come," he said softly. He stepped aside, but only just enough to force me to brush past him. "Sorry, bus was late," I muttered, keeping my eyes down. He leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "You never need to apologize to me." That word, me, lodged in my head like a shard of glass. My mom always told me to trust my instincts, but how could I explain this? How do you report a stare, a whisper, a pause that lasts too long? It didn't stop at class. He started appearing in places he had no reason to be, standing in the hallway outside my art room, waiting in the lunch queue behind me, even once leaning against the staff car park gate after school. His phone was in his hand, but his eyes were locked on me. I didn't tell anyone properly. A couple of girls noticed, but they turned it into a joke. "Teacher's pet," they'd tease, rolling their eyes. One even smirked. "Betty fancies you," as if it were some prize. Then came awards night. Art and design had been my escape that year, the one place I could breathe. Despite everything at home, I poured myself into it, and when I got invited to the achievement ceremony in May, Mom insisted we go. She brought Dad and my little sister too. The hall was packed, buzzing with chatter and camera flashes. I tugged nervously at the hem of my skirt, scanning the crowd. And that's when I saw him. Mr. Linton. He was sitting just 3 seats down from my family. He wasn't on the program. He didn't even teach the subject. He had no reason to be there. And yet there he was, smiling that same slow smile before lifting his hand in a deliberate wave. My skin prickled cold. "Mom," I whispered urgently, leaning toward her. "That's my English teacher." She followed my gaze. Her jaw tightened. "Is he supposed to be here?" I shook my head. When they called my name, walking onto that stage felt like stepping under a spotlight, like his eyes were a camera lens zooming in frame by frame. My hands shook as I took the certificate, my smile frozen in place. After the ceremony, the crowd funneled toward the exits. I felt it before I saw it, his presence just behind us. Mom noticed too. His footsteps matched ours as he tried to close the distance. "Keep walking," Mom hissed under her breath. Then he called my name. Once, twice, cheerful, too cheerful. Mom stopped dead in the corridor, spun on her heel, and faced him full on. Her voice cut through the noise, sharp and steady. "You need to move, now." His smile widened, stretched into something ugly. But he said nothing. He just stepped back, still smiling as though he'd won something. That was the last time I ever saw him in person. By November, he was gone. No announcement, no explanation, just a substitute in his place. Some kids whispered he'd had a family emergency, but I never believed it. The rest of that year, every man in glasses made my pulse spike. Every dark head bent over a phone sent me bracing. It's taken me years to accept that it wasn't in my head. That feeling unsafe is enough. That being cornered, stared at, whispered to in ways that make your skin crawl. That alone is wrong. I wish I'd spoken sooner. I wish someone had told me, at 14, that you don't need proof to matter. That a gut-deep bad feeling counts. That boundaries exist even when someone smiles at you. I tell this story not for revenge, but for clarity. For every quiet girl sitting at the back of a classroom wondering if she's imagining things, you're not. I never thought a civics teacher could make me afraid of authority. Growing up, I believed school was supposed to be one of the safest places for a kid like me. My name is Felix Anderson, and when I first started high school in Norrha, a quiet suburb in southern Sweden bordered by thick pine forests, I expected my biggest challenge would be figuring out how to fit in. I was 15, awkward, scrawny, the kind of kid who spent more time strumming a cheap guitar in his bedroom than actually talking to people. My mom and I had just moved there after her divorce, and I didn't know a single soul. That first year at Visterskolan Gymnasium felt like walking into a room where everyone was already deep in conversation. Friend groups were established, stories were shared, and I had nothing but silence to offer. The school itself was unremarkable. Sprawling red brick buildings, a courtyard with a cracked basketball court, and the ever-present smell of reheated cafeteria food trailing through the hallways. Ordinary, predictable, safe. At least that's what I thought, until I met our civics teacher. His name was Eric Jernmark, though everyone casually referred to him as Mr. J. He wasn't like the other teachers. He looked to be in his early 40s, with slicked back hair already streaked with gray, and he always wore black turtlenecks, as if he thought of himself as some philosopher or tortured artist. His smile never seemed to reach his eyes. And yet, students adored him. He had this disarming way of making you feel sharper, wittier, more interesting than you really were. He'd laugh at even the weakest jokes, toss out quotes from philosophers like they were song lyrics, and drop references to obscure bands or underground artists that made him seem cool, in the know. But something about him unsettled me. At first it was subtle, the way he lingered near certain students' desks a beat too long, or how he always chose the same group of boys to help organize the archive room during lunch, only to return alone minutes later with some excuse about them leaving early. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just paranoid, until the night he added me on Facebook. It was a Wednesday. I was sitting cross-legged on my bed, tuning my guitar, when the notification flashed, "Eric Jernmark has sent you a friend request." I froze, staring at the screen. I'd barely spoken 5 words to him in class. Why me? Curiosity won out. I clicked his profile. His friend list was full of students from school. His posts were strange. Quotes about philosophy, pictures of wine bottles, captions like, "Perfect night to ponder Plato and pleasure." Odd, but not incriminating. Against my better judgment, I accepted. I was 15, lonely, and the idea that a teacher, someone adults respected, wanted me in his orbit gave me a twisted sense of belonging. An hour later, my inbox pinged. "Mr. J. Heard you play guitar. Rare these days. Do you write your own stuff or just covers?" I stared at the message before typing back, fingers hesitant on the keys. "Me. I write some stuff, not much, still figuring it out." "Mr. J. That's brilliant. Would love to hear you sometime. Maybe swing by my place after class one day. Got a beautiful acoustic and a few vintage vinyls you'd appreciate." I didn't respond. My gut nodded. Something about it felt wrong, though I convinced myself maybe he was just being supportive. None of the other teachers even remembered my name. The messages didn't stop. A few days later, he left a comment under a blurry photo of me holding my guitar. "Rock stars like you must have a hard time staying innocent." At 1:14 a.m. one night, my phone buzzed. "Mr. J. Ever wonder what separates morality from pleasure? Civics is a strange thing. Another time." "Mr. J. Do you get many girls? A guy like you probably has no trouble. Lucky stallion." That word, stallion, he used it often. Too often. It made my skin crawl. Then one evening, I opened Messenger and saw something that made my chest tighten. "Come over. We'll talk music. Just a little wine and philosophy. Don't worry. I won't bite. unless you ask me to." That was the message. The words glowed on my screen, and my stomach flipped so violently I had to set my phone down. My throat went dry. I wanted to block him right there, but I didn't. I didn't report him. I didn't even tell my mom. Why? Because a part of me kept whispering that maybe I was overreacting. He was a teacher, respected, someone who wrote recommendation letters and quoted philosophers. He was the cool adult everyone wanted approval from, and I was just a nobody, another quiet kid with a guitar and no spine. It wasn't until one afternoon, sitting on the stone wall behind the gym during lunch, that everything shifted. My classmate, Isaac, slid down beside me. He was pale, trembling slightly, and when he pulled out his phone, his hand shook. "You need to see this," he muttered. He handed me the screen. The message was from Mr. J. A photo, his bare lower back, and more. Captioned, "Take me hard, you know you want to." I gagged, clapping a hand over my mouth. My whole body went cold. Isaac was 17, a swimmer, top of the class, sharp as hell. He told me Mr. J had been messaging him for weeks. It started with homework help, then drifted into late-night texts, and finally into this filth. He looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin while telling me. We went to the school counselor together. It was the hardest walk of my life. At first, the school board tried to smooth it over, called it personal conduct outside the classroom, not their jurisdiction. But once screenshots started surfacing, dozens of them, over 30 students, everything cracked open. He'd been messaging boys across multiple grades, some even younger than me. Always late at night. Always the same pattern. Flattering, manipulative, predatory. He was suspended but not fired. The case went to court. The verdict, 6 months probation, community service, a fine paid to Isaac. That was it. No jail time, no registry, nothing that would actually protect anyone. His lawyer painted him as lonely, unstable, and under the influence, claimed we had misread intellectual mentorship as flirtation. Absolute bullshit. I thought that would be the end of it. But 2 years later, scrolling online, I saw his face again. Faculty page of a private school in Göteborg. There he was, Eric Jernmark, teaching civics again. Same black turtleneck, same smirk, like nothing had ever happened. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Even now, years later, I still see his messages when I close my eyes. Sometimes I catch myself wondering what would have happened if I'd gone to his house that night. Other times I think about the kids he's teaching now, whether they know what kind of man stands at the front of their classroom. And when I pass by a classroom and see a teacher leaning a little too close to a student, I can't help but wonder, how many more Eric Jernmarks are out there, waiting, watching, smiling. I didn't want to be at Maple Ridge High. The place felt like a sterilized version of what a school should be. Walls painted in glossy white, lockers free of dents or stickers. Even the floors smelled faintly of bleach. It was too clean, too polished, like someone was trying to scrub away anything human or honest. I missed Emerson Hall, the uneven floors that creaked when you walked too fast, the chipped bricks that flaked under your fingertips, the graffiti under the staircase, carved initials layered over each other like a hidden history only the kids knew. That place had character. It felt alive, and it was the last place I ever felt like I belonged. But Emerson was gone for me. Everything was gone. My parents died in a fire. It happened on a night I wasn't even home. I was staying at my best friend Kylie's for a sleepover. We'd been up late watching movies, trying not to wake her little brother. I remember the wind howling against the windows, a sharp whistling sound that made me restless, though I didn't know why. The next morning, Kylie's mom wouldn't let me leave. She had me sit down at the kitchen table, handed me a mug of cocoa, and her face was pale in a way that made my chest cave before she even said the words. "The house. It's gone," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Isabel. Your parents were inside. Her voice blurred after that. I was 17, and just like that, I had no siblings, no grandparents, no one left. The state sent me to Hillmere, a town so small it felt like a forgotten map corner. One grocery store, one traffic light, one high school that looked more like a renovated hospital than a place where kids laughed in the hallways. I went to live with my mom's older brother, Alan, a man I'd met maybe twice before. He was kind enough, awkward in that way relatives can be when they don't know where to put their hands or their words. His wife, Lorraine, seemed unsettled. Not cruel, just uneasy about having a grieving teenager under her roof. I learned quickly to keep out of their way. I stayed in the spare room, headphones on, letting music drown the kind of silence that isn't peaceful, but heavy, aching. My first day at Maple Ridge passed without anything worth remembering. The kids stared just long enough to satisfy their curiosity before moving on. I didn't expect sympathy. I just wanted to exist unnoticed. I made it through homeroom, algebra, history, survived, not really present. Then came chemistry. That's when I met him. "Hey, new girl." The teacher's voice cut out as I slipped into the classroom, barely 30 seconds late. He was standing behind a desk crowded with oddly shaped glassware, and when he turned toward me, his grin was stretched too wide, too practiced. "The name's Mr. Grayson," he said, tugging at his lab coat like it was part of some performance. "You must be Isabel." I froze, heat crawling up the back of my neck. "Yeah," I muttered, barely above a whisper, and took the only empty seat in the front row. His eyes stayed on me a beat too long before drifting back to the board. But throughout the lesson, I felt them. Flicking over, lingering when he thought I wouldn't notice. At first, I brushed it off. Teachers can be strange, especially science teachers. But over the next few weeks, the strangeness sharpened into something I couldn't ignore. He singled me out constantly, complimented how focused I looked, asked me to stay after class to review concepts I already understood, and left little candies on my desk with post-it notes. Most had chemical formulas scribbled on them. His idea of quirky humor, maybe. Until one didn't feel like a joke. C10H14N2, nicotine, and underneath, written in cramped letters, "Like addiction, you're hard to ignore." My stomach flipped. The candy sat untouched in my bag for days before I finally threw it away. The only person I halfway connected with was Sophie. She sat behind me in chemistry, and one day at lunch she slid her tray across from mine. "You live on Briar Lane, right?" she asked, picking at her sandwich. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, why?" "I live a block away. I saw you walking last week." "Okay." The word came out flat, but conversation didn't come easy anymore. She must have sensed it, because she smiled without pressing. "I'll walk with you sometime. It's a quiet neighborhood." That was how it started. Sophie was gentle, awkward in a way that felt genuine, and most importantly, she didn't dig at wounds I wasn't ready to talk about. We walked together sometimes. We worked on projects together. She filled the silence without making it heavy. One afternoon, we stayed late finishing our chemistry assignment. Mr. Grayson was at his desk, grading papers. When Sophie went to the bathroom, I felt the shift before I saw it. His chair scraped back, his footsteps moving closer. Then he was sitting on the edge of our table, too close, his eyes flicking over me like I was another equation to solve. "You're brilliant," he said. "Your project work, your posture, everything about you screams discipline." The way he said, "everything about you," made my skin crawl. I forced a tight smile, pretending to focus on my notes. Then softer. "You remind me of someone I once loved." That was it for me. I shoved my things into my bag and left, not waiting for Sophie to return. When I told her later, she lowered her voice until it was barely audible. "That guy is a creep. You're not the first he's made uncomfortable." My chest tightened. "So why hasn't anyone reported him?" She looked around the cafeteria, then leaned closer. "Because he's careful. He never says or does anything that crosses a line on paper. Just subtle stuff. Enough that people brush it off. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter. And then it escalated. One afternoon, I was the last one at my locker. The hall was almost empty, lockers slamming shut in the distance. He appeared beside me so suddenly I flinched. "I was wondering," he began, his voice low, smooth in a way that didn't belong in a hallway, "if you'd be willing to attend a small academic gathering I'm hosting for my top students." "You're one of them," Mr. Grayson said, voice pitched like he was letting me in on some secret. "Obviously, I don't mean formal. Nothing academic, nothing serious. Just pizza and board games. You could use some friends, Isabel." The way he said my name made the air shift. It wasn't casual. It wasn't kind. It sounded like a warning, like he knew I didn't have any real options. And if I said no, he'd find a way to make me regret it. My throat tightened, words sticking, but his stare pinned me in place. Against everything inside me screaming not to, I nodded. "Good." His mouth stretched into a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "I'll text you the address." My stomach dropped. I didn't remember ever giving him my number. The night of the so-called gathering, dread pressed on my chest like a weight. I wanted to stay home, but I couldn't shake the fear of what would happen if I didn't show. I told Sophie about it, and her reaction was immediate. "Text me the location the second you get there," she ordered, eyes sharp. "If I don't hear from you in 2 hours, I'm calling the cops." Her certainty steadied me enough to leave. Mr. Grayson's house sat at the far edge of town, a 2-story place that seemed too large, too polished for a single man. The windows glared like watchful eyes. When I rang the bell, the door swung open almost instantly, as if he'd been standing right there, waiting. "You're early," he said, smiling too wide again. "Come in." I stepped inside, but everything felt wrong. The lights were dim, the air unnervingly still. The furniture was spotless, sterile, arranged like a showroom no one had ever truly lived in. There were no voices, no laughter, no students. "Where is everyone?" I asked, my voice too thin. "Oh, they're running late. Sit, I'll get you something to drink." I stayed frozen by the door. "I'm okay," I muttered, but he was already disappearing into the kitchen. My pulse thundered. I pulled out my phone to text Sophie, but the screen mocked me. No service. When he returned, he held out a soda. "Here." I didn't take it. "You're trembling," he said softly, eyes narrowing like he was studying a specimen. "Why are you afraid of me, Isabel?" "I'm not." The lie tasted like ash. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You can be honest with me. I'm the only one who understands you. We've both lost everything." His hand lifted, fingers brushing a strand of my hair. His breath hitched. "You're beautiful when you're scared." Every instinct in me broke loose. I spun, bolting for the door, but the knob rattled uselessly in my hands, locked. He caught me from behind, arms clamping down like iron. I screamed, driving my elbow into his ribs with every ounce of strength I had. He stumbled back, cursing, but before I could reach the door again, he lunged. We crashed to the floor. He tackled me, his grip dragging me across the smooth hardwood toward a door I hadn't noticed before. The basement. "Let me go!" My voice cracked with panic. "You'll thank me someday," he hissed in my ear. The basement air was icy, stinking faintly of bleach. My stomach turned as my eyes adjusted. The walls were covered in photographs, hundreds of them. Me, walking home, sitting in class, buying groceries, standing on Sophie's porch, even one of me sleeping in my bedroom. My body locked with horror. "I've watched you for months," he whispered, tying me to a chair with practiced efficiency. "I know your patterns, your fears. I can fix you. I will." He pulled open a drawer, the metallic scrape echoing. From it, he took a scalpel, holding it with reverence. His gaze flicked to me, feverish. "I want you to see how deep my love goes." And then, before I could process, He pressed the blade into his own chest, carving clumsily, blood welling in shaky lines. "Your name," he panted. "It belongs here, next to my heart." I screamed, begging, my voice shredding. He didn't stop. His face was radiant with some twisted joy, lost in his delusion. Then, bang, bang, bang. The front door upstairs. A voice shouted, "Police!" Mr. Grayson froze, eyes wild, desperate. "No, not now. Not when I'm so close." The basement door exploded open. Heavy boots thundered down the stairs. Uniformed officers flooded the room, guns raised. "Drop the knife!" For a moment I thought he'd lunge at me. Instead, he turned the blade toward himself. The cops swarmed him, wrestling the scalpel from his hands before he could finish what he started. They untied me. My wrists burned, my whole body shivering from the cold, the dust, the sweat, the small cuts from fighting back. When they helped me up the stairs, my knees nearly buckled. Outside, the red and blue lights painted the night in chaotic color. Sophie was there, standing by a cruiser, her face pale with terror. Beside her was Uncle Alan, rigid and shocked. The second I saw Sophie, I collapsed into her arms. Sobs tore out of me, the first I'd allowed since my parents died. She held me tight, whispering over and over, "You're safe now. You're safe." Mr. Grayson was taken away in handcuffs, thrashing, screaming about love and destiny. Later, the police found his journals, dozens of them, pages filled with my name, drawings, twisted poetry. He'd been watching me for longer than I could comprehend. And worse, he'd done this before, fixating on other students, always staying just far enough under the radar. I was the one he finally snapped for. He's in a psychiatric facility now, locked away indefinitely. It took me months to breathe normally again. Therapy helped. Sophie helped. Time helped. The school tried. Announcements, counseling, promises of reform. None of it erased what happened. Even now, sometimes when I pass the science wing, I swear I hear the faint clink of glass or his voice murmuring my name. But then I remind myself, I survived him, and he'll never get another chance. I never liked chemistry, not because it was impossible, though it often felt that way, but because every class felt like being trapped in a windowless room where the air grew thinner by the minute. The periodic table blurred together until the symbols looked like hieroglyphics. Equations floated on the board, meaningless squiggles that mocked me every time I tried to make sense of them. And the smell of ethanol in the lab always left me queasy, like a hangover without the fun. Still, I would have taken that over what happened after Mr. Gray disappeared. He didn't even say goodbye. Mr. Gray had been our chemistry teacher since freshman year. He wasn't exciting or inspiring, but he was steady. He had this slow, almost drowsy voice that could hush even the loudest kids. He never raised it, not once, and somehow that calmness kept the whole class in line. Then, one Monday morning, he was gone. Back then, I lived in Ellensworth, a bleak little town straddling the Oregon-Washington border. The place felt permanently cold, like the wind carried ice straight from the mountains. It was mostly pine trees, highway gas stations, and one high school, Ellensworth High, where my junior year was crawling along like a slow death march. My name's Aaron Price. I was 17 when it all happened. After Mr. Gray's disappearance, the principal, Mr. Elton, made a clipped announcement over the PA. There will be a substitute in chemistry for the foreseeable future. No explanation, no hint at why. Teachers whispered in the hallways, but none of it reached us. Students did what students do, filled the silence with rumors. "He's got cancer," one kid claimed. "No way. He was caught with a student," another muttered. "He just quit. He was sick of this dump," someone else said. Speculation spread fast, ugly and careless, until it stopped mattering. People forgot to care until he arrived, the new substitute. That morning was freezing, even inside the building. Our breath fogged in the hall as though the walls couldn't keep out the cold. I sat next to Lena Bennett, who always wore 2 jackets stacked over each other and had earbuds dangling from her hoodie strings, though I don't think I ever actually saw her phone turned on. She was sketching in her notebook, probably another tattoo design she'd dream of getting someday. I was half-heartedly scrolling through college applications on my phone, trying to keep the creeping panic about the future from swallowing me. We were mid-conversation about Mr. Gray when the classroom door creaked open. And not just a creak, it groaned, high-pitched and dramatic, like a sound effect straight out of a bad horror film. A man stepped in. He wasn't old, maybe mid-40s, but something about him felt damaged. His hair jutted out in erratic tufts as though he'd been struck by lightning. His thick 70s-style bifocals magnified his eyes so much they looked cartoonish. A navy coat hung over a wrinkled shirt, the kind of wrinkles that no iron could undo anymore. In his hand was a scuffed leather briefcase which he placed on the desk with surprising care. He stood there, silent. 10 long seconds. Just staring. His gaze swept across the room, deliberate and unsettling. Lena leaned closer, whispering under her breath, "He looks like he hasn't slept since the Bush administration." Finally, the man spoke. His voice was sharp, theatrical, and yet unstable, like someone halfway between a Shakespeare audition and a nervous breakdown. "My name is Dr. Clarence Velman. You may refer to me only as Dr. Velman." No, sir. Just Dr. Velman. I hold 2 PhDs and I will not be disrespected." The room stiffened. Nobody laughed. Without warning, he snapped his fingers and jabbed a hand toward the front row. "You, boy with the bleached hair, state the first law of thermodynamics." The kid, Dylan from the wrestling team, froze. I don't know." Dr. Velman bent down until his nose hovered inches from Dylan's. His magnified eyes looked like they could swallow him whole. "Then why are you in my class?" The silence was suffocating. No one moved. No one breathed. Straightening up, he turned to the whiteboard. He didn't write his name. Instead, in large block letters, he scrawled, "Ignorance is a disease. I am the cure." It was so absurd I nearly laughed, but when I glanced around, not even Lena cracked a smile. For the first few weeks, Dr. Velman stayed just inside the lines of what was acceptable. And here was the strangest part. He was good. Brilliant, even. Students who barely scraped by before were suddenly answering questions with confidence. Chemistry started to click, piece by piece. His methods were intense, sometimes humiliating but effective. He made us chant chemical formulas like multiplication tables. He banned phones entirely, forcing us to drop them in a wooden box on his desk before class. Anyone who resisted got kicked out. No warnings, no second chances. Whenever we asked about lab work, he'd dismiss us. "The lab is under inspection. I am refining the environment for optimal learning. Soon." But the door to the lab was always locked. That's when things got strange. One afternoon after class, I went up to the desk to grab my phone from the box. As I reached in, I noticed a slip of folded paper resting at the bottom. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except my name was scrawled across the front. I unfolded it. "History will betray you. Science will save you. Choose wisely. CV." My stomach tightened. I crumpled the note and stuffed it into my backpack, trying to shake it off. But I couldn't. Because just days earlier, I'd told Lena quietly that I was thinking of majoring in history. How the hell did he know? Later that week, Dr. Velman handed out a surprise test. None of us were ready, but when the papers came back, every single student had an A. Even Samira, who'd failed every exam since sophomore year, sat there grinning, holding her paper like it was a golden ticket. "I didn't even finish all the questions," she said, her voice trembling with disbelief. I looked down at my own test. My answers weren't just wrong. They were laughably wrong in a couple places. Yet he'd marked them correct, neat red check marks where there should have been X's. Something wasn't right. When class ended, I lingered by my desk until the room cleared. Then I walked up to him. Dr. Velman. He didn't look up from his briefcase. Yes, Aaron? I froze. He'd said my name before I gave it. How do you... I know all my students. His magnified eyes lifted slowly, pinning me. Speak. I think you misgraded my test. I missed at least 2 questions. I don't think I deserve an A. He stood, moving toward me with deliberate, soundless steps. His voice dropped low, almost conspiratorial. Do you believe the universe owes you justice? What is it you want, Aaron? Truth? He tilted his head. Truth is a poor man's luxury. Do you want to get into NYU or not? My blood turned to ice. NYU was my dream school, but I hadn't told anyone. Not Lena, not my parents, no one. How do you... He cut me off. I have eyes where others have blindfolds. Now, take your perfect grade and go, or stay and learn something. Then he smiled, not a warm smile, not even smug. It was the smile of a man who knew too much and took pleasure in the weight of it. I left, but the unease followed me like a shadow. The next day, I waited after class pretending to tie my shoes until he slipped into the lab. Once the coast seemed clear, I crept to the door. Locked, as always. I scanned the hall, heart pounding, until I spotted a vent low on the wall. Dropping to my knees, I pressed my face close to the slats. Inside, the lab glowed red. Dozens of beakers bubbled on strange apparatuses, their contents hissing softly. Charts covered the walls, some diagrams of human anatomy, others like maps of the brain. But what froze me wasn't the sight. It was the sound. Laughter, not just one voice, many. Layers of chuckles and whispers overlapping, weaving together into something inhuman. Yet in the shadows of that room, there was only Velman. I staggered back, breath shallow, and fled. That night I called Lena. I told her everything about the lights, the charts, the laughter. You think he's experimenting? She asked. Like, on us? Something worse, I said. I think he's manipulating us. The grades, the way he knows things about me. Things I've never told anyone. Lena went quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, Aaron, remember how Mr. Gray left? Yeah. I think we need to find out why. That Friday, we hatched a plan. After school, Lena faked a nosebleed in the main office, buying me a few minutes. I slipped into the records room, the smell of paper and dust thick in the air. Mr. Gray's personnel file, gone. Not transferred, not archived. Erased. I moved to the substitute files. There it was, Clarence Velman. But there was no official application, no references, nothing. Just a single sheet of paper with Principal Lulton's scrawl. Urgent placement approved, CV vetted. That was it. No process, no oversight. We decided we'd confront the principal on Monday. But Monday never came the way we expected. The morning of our midterm, we walked into class and froze. All the desks were shoved to the back. A projector screen hung at the front, flickering with grainy black and white footage. It was us. Surveillance footage of our class, students sitting at their desks from previous weeks. Is that last week? Lena whispered. We all stood in stunned silence as the camera zoomed in on one student, his eyes flicking to his neighbor's paper. Cheating. Dr. Velman paused the footage, then turned, pointing at the boy. You see? You cannot be trusted. You leave now. The student bolted, pale and shaking. Velman switched off the projector, walked to his desk, and produced a metal case. He clicked it open. Rows of syringes glinted under the fluorescent lights. This, he said, is your real test. Someone shouted, What the hell is that? Truth serum, he replied flatly. You want to cheat truth? You want to lie to science? He lunged toward me first, syringe in hand. Instinct took over. I slammed my fist on the fire alarm. The shrill wail split the air. Chaos erupted. Students screamed, chairs crashing to the floor. Velman roared, an animalistic shriek thrashing, overturning desks as though strength surged unnaturally through him. The principal burst in just as Velman hurled a chair straight through a window. Police were called. They stormed the building, dragging him away in handcuffs while he laughed, a laugh that sounded eerily like the chorus I'd heard in the lab. When they searched the lab, they found the setup, chemicals bubbling like a meth lab, diagrams of students with psychological notes scrawled in the margins, entire plans titled compliance testing. But the worst thing was a folder. Inside, bold letters read, Phase 2, Chemical Reconditioning of Adolescence. Pilot Group, Ellensworth High. Dr. Velman was shoved into the back of a squad car, still smiling. As they dragged him past us, he shouted, "You think this ends with me? I was trying to save you. Fine. Rot in your mediocrity." He's in a psychiatric facility now, but I don't sleep well anymore, because the last thing he screamed, just before the doors slammed shut, was this: "They'll send someone else one day soon when class will begin again."